the Evolution Security Podcast.
This podcast is brought to you in part by Tenacor. Tenacor is a gear manufacturing company building equipment that works. They have a law enforcement background and self-select into the hardest of training. Try their Velo 4 AIWB holster. All of the EvoSec crew use this holster daily. Find them at tenacor.com. That's TENICOR.com. Use EvoSec for a 10% off at checkout. Again, the code EVOSEC, EVOSEC, for 10% off at checkout. We have also recently partnered with Origin USA. Origin is a lifestyle company making jiu-jitsu gis, rash guards, boots, and jeans, and producing world-class supplements. They use cotton grown in the USA, woven on their looms, and stitched together by American workers, bringing back American manufacturing. Find them at originmaine.com. That's ORIGINMAINE.com. The EvoSec crew also uses and loves Origin gis and supplements. Enter EvoSec10 for 10% off at checkout. That's EVOSEC10, EvoSec10 for 10% off. This includes Molk, Discipline, and Joint Warfare, the Jocko-labeled brands. If you would like to find us online, visit evosec.org for promotions, upcoming classes, and events. Please go on and sign up for our newsletter. We will be running periodic contests to win products from our sponsors. Also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at EvoSecUSA. That's EVOSEC USA. Lastly, we would love to hear from you. If you have questions, show topics, or comments, both good and bad, contact us at crew@evosec.org. That's CREW@evosec.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a quick pause and congratulate the winner of our first signed copy of KR Training's Strategies and Standards for Defensive Handgun Training. Congratulations to Greg Walls of Kansas. He's our first winner. So thanks a lot, Greg, for interacting with us, and we know you're going to get something out of that book. So for the rest of the folks out there in the audience, if you're still interested in winning the second copy we have, go ahead and go to our website, evosec.org, and look for the hot button to sign up for our newsletter to win.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We'd like to welcome Chris LeBlanc back, our second return guest, and we're pretty excited about that. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Awesome. Hey, and of course, Eric and Aaron are here. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing great here. Glad to be with you guys.
Yeah, glad to be back with Chris again.
Yeah, thanks for coming back to the show to support us and bless us and our audience with your wisdom, brother. So for our audience, of course, you did this before, but you were on our fourth podcast, and it was a great educational show. And definitely, folks, go back and check that out. A lot of good content. But go ahead and give us some cliff notes on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm a almost 23-year law enforcement officer. Most of that time, probably about 17 of it now, has been on SWAT. And then I don't even know how long I've been doing different close combat and martial arts, mostly judo, jiu-jitsu, some traditional stuff. And then, of course, ECQC and various other systems that I've done over the years.
So, Chris, a little while back, I remember it vividly, you and I had, like we normally have, a superb conversation. I mean, I can always sit and just listen to your awesome wisdom on the other end. And I remember us discussing the current state of law enforcement. And I just thought, man, that would be a great show. And so that's our intent this evening. With that said, I understand that this could be a loaded question, but as far as law enforcement as a whole, do you believe it's moving in the right direction, policing philosophy-wise and SOP-wise?
I think it is, actually. There are the media, and I think a lot of the attention to things like use of force, to some of the things that we've seen, while in a lot of cases actually they're come from a misunderstanding of the law and kind of what police use of force entails, how police are trained. But I think the overall effect that I've seen has some positives to it. It's probably a process we're going to work through over a period of years, and it's going to require a lot more understanding from the perspective, I think, of the public and obviously the politicians who are drawn from the public. But overall, I think we're on a positive track.
Well, that's good to hear. And this is, a lot of this is coming from a citizen from the outside looking on the media. So that's a big perspective. But I will honestly say that I train with a lot of LEO. And so that does shape a lot of my opinion. And frankly, I do believe that gives me a little bit of a better perspective than the general public. And I would say that all three of us, as far as the EvoSec crew, train with law enforcement on a regular basis. So I would, the main thing that I've also observed, and I wanted to get your opinion on it because frankly, I believe it's a really good thing. And that is that there seems to be an embracing of the combat sports model, i.e. wrestling, jiu-jitsu, judo, just seems to be gaining a solid ground. Do you think that's a positive thing? Can you expound on that?
Yeah, I think some of that it is probably the LEO that you happen to be focused or happen to be training with. I think in the bigger picture, there's not so much of that. I do think that you do see some of it starting to come in. For example, with the Gracie LE program, there are some sort of niche groups that are proposing some of that. I don't think that's really filtered down to law enforcement as a whole yet. Although I think that if anything, there has been a much greater focus on training and the fact that even agencies that are well trained don't actually train very much at all. And the stuff that they choose to train in tends not to be applicable in the kinds of situations that LE wants to use them, or should be using them in, I should say. I think as we see more video, and as we see more video of people who are obviously trained in jiu-jitsu and have some level of skill, I think we may see more of it come in. I know at least, for example, LAPD has a less lethal symposium where they review uses of force and things like that and kind of talk about what they're experiencing. And they were looking at grappling and revisiting grappling as something that's useful and something that officers should be doing. But within law enforcement, I think it's individual officers or individual defensive tactics programs that might be doing that. I don't think it's very widespread yet. I do think that people are looking at training in general and looking at what we need to do to make it better. I think that it's going to take a little bit more of a push to go there simply because that's a huge investment of time and a huge investment of effort. It can be done. I have my own ideas on how we could do that, but I think a lot of agencies are going to balk at that because they're thinking about bottom line and thinking about getting bodies on the street, getting people who are not injured, training people. Again, law enforcement officers are drawn from a wide range of people, and not everybody's going to really be into doing that kind of training.
Well, and Chris, what I will say or add to that is I am sure that my perspective may be skewed because most of the guys and gals that I train with, LEO wise, they are folks that have self-selected into that training. So yeah, I could see how my perspective may be skewed a little bit, but kind of following up on that, and I'll pass this to Aaron, is that so you probably believe that doing a lot of leg locks and sports generated X guard, which I'm really starting to love, still might need to have some perspective and may not be the best stuff for them to be focusing on.
Yeah. I mean, the advantage to something like jiu-jitsu, and we'll just say jiu-jitsu. I think if we look at wrestling, if you look at judo, those are probably going to be too injurious for the average officer to be training seriously on a regular basis. Jiu-jitsu has a real advantage in that you use the same skills, but it's got a much lower intensity rate, or you can train it at a lower intensity while working the same skills. That aspect is the most important one. I think when it comes to skill selection, what I would see, or kind of in my vision, how you would do jiu-jitsu for law enforcement would be very different from what you're doing in your typical sports club, even probably kind of your quote unquote old school jiu-jitsu club that focuses on self-defense. Because LE is going to have a particular approach that they need to do and cover a wide range of skills. You have to do everything from, okay, do I have, say, a 6'3", 250-pound violent but autistic 14-year-old that I have to restrain, versus do I have a violent felon who's trying to get to a gun that's in his waistband and trying to get it out and shoot me. I'm going to use use maybe different skills. There's going to be some similarities and then some differences in how I approach either of those problems. But the base is going to be in that opposed work, that resistance, that alive work. It's just in how you end up applying it for the end result based on the situation and the circumstance that you're dealing with.
All right, Chris. Hey, Aaron here. So this question line is probably going to take us a little bit more serious, but wanted to ask, since Officer Wilson was acquitted of the shooting of Mike Brown and its aftermath and rioting and other politicized police shootings, there seems to be a rise in anti-police attitudes. Of course, President Obama was not really a friend of law enforcement. Bill de Blasio of New York, mayor of New York, ran on anti-police rhetoric. And recently, the mayor of Minneapolis said he wants to end, quote, warrior training for police. So what are your thoughts on the attitude at the national and municipality level and how it's affecting policing and police officers in general?
How much time do you have?
Hey, go ahead. It's your time.
Some of that is going to be regionally, it's going to, the attitude and what you see is going to be based on the region, I think, of the country that you're in, and to where some of the attitudes lie. I think on an individual perspective, individual calls, individual people that you're dealing with. I mean, certainly I've had that experience where people actually are trying to use it as a way to intimidate law enforcement. They're using it as a way to sort of get you off your game by claiming that, oh, it's racist. Oh, well, you're just going to shoot me, et cetera. And a lot of that has nothing to do with actually the race of the individuals that you're dealing with. Some people are just either hate police, or some people are trying to use it as a way to impact how you're dealing with them. By and large, I think if you're professional, most of the time you can pretty much mitigate any of those issues with the individuals that you're dealing with. In the bigger picture, I think where we see more of an issue is kind of the tail wagging the dog. And so you have the media, which because it's controversial, and because it's the kind of thing that draws a lot of attention, the media really goes wild with that stuff, and then that has a resultant effect on your local politicians, which has a resulting effect on your police administrations and stuff. To the extent that you have, now we have this guardian versus warrior philosophy, which the Obama administration was very much a proponent of. In fact, the original author of that, it is the person that sits and runs our police academy here in Washington State, and she sat on the president's advisory board, law enforcement advisory board for Obama, and very much talking about this guardian versus warrior philosophy. I don't think they understand warriorship, what that means. This is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. When you read Plato and you look at what he intended for the guardians, they very frequently use the word warrior, even the word soldier. The guardians were both your army that would go out and fight your enemies outside of your city and would protect your city on the inside from criminals and things like that. And everything they talk about is absolutely a warrior mentality, a warrior approach. I think where it gets confused is, how do you define warrior? And at what level of training, what level of preparedness are we talking about? What level of, what the warrior ethos is, and how you view dealing with people, and dealing with people who are not a threat, or dealing with people who are part of your society, et cetera, versus dealing with a quote unquote enemy. And that's really where things get very confused. One aspect of that kind of goes the other way, though, is the idea of what does it take to be a warrior, and what allows you to call yourself a warrior. And I think from that perspective, I think there is some valid criticism in that, and that would be, you have people that don't train, that don't prepare themselves, and that overreact in situations, and yet at the same time want to be called warriors. And you can't have that either. You have to have a middle ground there where, you are prepared for the circumstances that you're going to face, so that you don't lose your composure, so that you don't, I call it fear biting, so that you don't overreact to a situation, or you don't immediately leap to lethal force because you've got nothing in between. And you do see some of that happening. And I think for some officers, the idea is, well, if my agency doesn't pay for me to do this training, or doesn't provide this training to me themselves, well, then I'm not going to do it. And yet I also want to kind of have this warrior mentality and walk around like I'm this highly trained individual, when the fact of the matter is most officers are not. And so it is a double-edged sword.
Brian, you got something, brother?
So I know we can't prove causation, but there also seems to be an appreciable rise in assaults or murders on police. In 2016, Dallas seemed to have some underpinnings of this rise in anti-police sentiment. Can you comment on that incident, and whether or not you believe the previously mentioned national rhetoric can push folks over the edge to commit such heinous crimes like this?
Yeah, I think it does. You have those individuals that don't like police anyway. And I think a lot of what they see simply is sort of kind of a foregone conclusion. It's kind of like, well, that's how they thought it was. And so now this is just proof that police are like that. The police are racist, or police abuse their authority. And so it does almost give them permission. I see it. I don't see as much of that. Obviously, I work in a place that's immediately contiguous to Portland, Oregon, which does have a lot of those issues. We don't have them as much, but I do think that the overall rhetoric does embolden some people. And I mean, it's natural that it would. When some of the stuff that you see is obviously pretty egregious, and it's the kind of thing. I mean, it's the kind of thing that, frankly, a lot of law enforcement officers that I know get angry about. When you see some things and you're like, "Are you serious? What working officer would do that? Why is that officer doing that?" For someone who maybe already nurses a hatred of police, that's only going to add fuel to the fire.
So I know that there's definitely departments that, have done some hand tying to an extent, but do you feel like officers themselves in some cases are reluctant to police as hard as they previously have because of backlash from support of their mayors or leadership?
Oh yeah, I think yes. I think some of it also, really what I'm seeing is some of it is because of what they're getting in academies and stuff. We're at an interesting time. My agency is, but I believe nationwide we're in a time when you have a lot of people that are starting and getting ready to transition out, that are getting ready to retire, while you have an influx of a lot of new officers. I think certainly what we've seen coming from the police academy is a lot of new officers almost seem to question their authority. They themselves question their authority. And that is going to have a natural effect of sort of dampening their initiative and dampening their activity, because a lot of them are like, some of it is not a case of, oh, I don't know the law. It's a case of, oh, well, can I enforce the law under these circumstances? Now, certainly, I think questions can be asked of any particular enforcement action where do we really want to push this issue? You have to know when it's time to walk away. You have to know when you can do something or should do something different. That, I think, is Greensboro, South Carolina situation that really turned into a total mess, where the officer ended up shooting the guy's mom and all that other stuff. It never needed to go there, because you're dealing with a guy basically who's a shoplifter and she wants to arrest him for shoplifting. You can walk away from that and get him some other time, when he's walking out on the street, or just, refer a charge and have it go to a warrant and take him then, again, when he's not in his house. Some of that decision making, though, I think people decide to kind of walk away from something because they don't really want to push an issue, either because they're not sure of their authority, or they are afraid of what the repercussions may be if something goes bad. You see the other end too, though, where, I mean, obviously municipalities and other places are, they live off of tax revenue. They live off of other actions and stuff that their law enforcement, in addition to taxes and stuff, that law enforcement takes. And so you'll see a push to, hey, we need to get these car registrations. Hey, you need to stop people for these traffic infractions and cite them and things like that. And that kind of gives a mixed message, because we're like, hey, we don't want you to push these minor issues, and yet, hey, we still need you to make money, because, in some cases, one of the things that came out of Ferguson was that's how they were actually funding their police agency. And so you have a lot of questions now with some of those circumstances, because it's like, wait, we have to do these minor. We have to enforce minor infractions. We have to enforce some of these situations, cite people, charge people with these different things, and yet we're hesitant to do so because we don't want it to turn into a use of force situation that's going to end up pretty ugly. And then you have officers who are hesitant to do either one. It turns into a big kind of swirling mess that a lot of people will have a hard time, especially newer officers, have a hard time kind of working their way through. I came up, obviously, last 23 years, is I've got a very different perspective on that. Have a lot of experience as a field supervisor. So I know I've got a better sense of it, but I see with a lot of newer people that they just don't have a sense of it and really don't know where the boundaries are. They don't know when they can push an issue. They don't know when they shouldn't push an issue. And, it's kind of one of these just because you can doesn't mean you should thing. But then sometimes, you should, you really have to. It's hard for people to figure out the difference between all those sometimes when they don't have a lot of experience and when they've been given a confusing set of directives.
Well, Chris, one of the most irritating things that I think about and or deal with, at least in discussions, is you have individuals that sit at home in their sedentary lifestyle. Journalists sit from the side in their Crystal Palace, and I'm sorry, I do have an issue with a lot of journalists, so that may come off as being a little bit rude, but they will sit and question law enforcement officers' decision-making process, having never been in any kind of real pressure in their lives. And those individuals sitting at home or these journalists have never had to make a life or death situation, and they will question that young law enforcement officer. Now, juxtapose that to there's been a few that have been brave enough to put themselves in, say, a simunition scenario, and they freeze up and or make a decision where they kill the person, or kill the person unnecessarily. And then all of a sudden the shoe is on the other foot. Can you hit on that?
Well, I think you described it perfectly. I mean, until you've walked in my shoes. I mean, unfortunately, that's not the way our system is set up. And we, on some level, heck, even when you're a soldier, you have to agree to those rules to be in this position. It is frustrating when you see some of those situations, and then kind of, validating when you see either activists or journalists go through some of that training and then make some of these bad calls or do bad shoots or what have you, just because it's like, oh yeah, see, now you know what it's like, and that's not even really knowing what it's like. That's just a scenario, right? Excuse me. But yeah, that's, of course that's frustrating. For me, a lot of it is, I understand, I guess, that they don't get what it's like to be in those situations where you have to make those decisions. But what's not acceptable is they have no understanding of what the law actually says. And they don't know things like Tennessee v. Garner. They don't know things like Graham v. Connor, which is really everything that police do as far as use of force is based on that case law. And there's no excuse for them not to know that. It's even more frustrating when you see politicians who are attorneys who don't understand that. Because I mean, that's kind of the bedrock of how our society works. And when they don't get that, when they don't understand the ramifications and the application of the law to a use of force, that can be even more frustrating, because that's stuff that they should know. They should know in certain circumstances that, hey, no, that what that officer did was absolutely legally justifiable. Now, we can argue the tactics, we can argue some of those other things as far as to what led up to the force, but I think where that gets really dangerous and people not understanding that is now we're getting to the point where you make a tactical mistake, you end up using force, and now we start talking about criminally charging police officers for really what started as maybe a tactical error, or where there was no violation of law whatsoever, based on the law. Like, hey, if you don't like that, then we need to change the law. It's not, hey, we're gonna hang, we're gonna burn officers in effigy, or we're gonna hang these guys out to dry. Of course, the way our society works, that maybe that's the process it needs to go through. But it really is that lack of understanding of the law that breeds some of that kind of mentality, I guess.
Well, Chris, you hit it on the head regarding soldiers, downrange. I can tell you, yes, I'm conflating myself in this situation, but there was a very unique situation that happened to me when I was deployed into the current hotbed in the sandbox. So we were in a convoy, and as we were leaving the wire, there was an individual that I could clearly see with a Molotov cocktail in his hand, with a lighter in his hand, trying to light this Molotov cocktail. And I actually remember vividly, I had my red dot right in his center mass as my vehicle. I was the TC in the vehicle. And I'm passing this individual, and I'm on the radio saying, "Hey, we got a guy with a Molotov cocktail. Guys, be on point." And we passed that individual, and he can't get his lighter to work. And I saw all this taking place, and he never got the Molotov cocktail lit. And, of course, my commander called it back to QRF, and they did whatever they did. And I'm thinking, okay, I made the right decision, because I can tell you that in that moment I was thinking about, what if I shoot this guy? I'm going to go through prosecution or possible prosecution. And that thought came into my mind. And I actually got reprimanded by my commander because I didn't shoot the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And my discussion was with him was, I said, "Sir, I thought in my mind, this guy did not like this Molotov cocktail, and I'm not going to shoot him until I see that lit." And he chewed my ass out. And to this day, I think I made the right decision, because frankly, I'm sitting here still not having a changed life. I think that I'd have been in deep trouble. And again, the SOPs or the rules of engagement, unfortunately, probably made me a little more cautious. But I believe I made the right decision. And allowed the QRF to take care of that situation. So, yeah, that was an incident as far as being a soldier that could have went the same way.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that really describes it perfectly, right? Because now you're in this decision loop, right? And it's not just, okay, hey, this is a legally justified shoot. Because I would argue you're there, right? You have the legal justification to shoot this guy, whether you're a soldier or whether you're a police officer in that situation, and depending obviously for soldiers on your ROE. And that's going to change, and obviously, as we know, has changed for you guys over there, or as time has gone on. But that's really that's that absolute combination of things that occurs. Where I think we sometimes forget is exactly that, is not just now I'm facing a lethal threat decision. Do I shoot this guy? Because he's obviously demonstrating intent, right? He's trying to light a Molotov cocktail, right? Arguably, if you shoot him after it's lit, it may be too late, right? Arguably, because he could still toss it, and you could come up with a lot of different scenarios in your mind. However, you're also processing, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble if I shoot this guy, aren't I? What's going to happen to me if I shoot this guy? And now you start, in Forsyth, they call it, you're reading tomorrow's headlines. And now you're like, what's going to happen to me if I do make that call? And every forced decision now, unless it's absolutely obvious, guys charging at you, cranking rounds at you, unless it's really obvious like that, that's the process that we're all going to go through. And that's exactly the process that I think a lot of LE is going through, even more so now, because of that very thing. I'm going to be the next guy on the news. And then now race has been so deeply injected into every discussion. Every use of force now that you see has a racial factor involved in it. If the subject of the issue is a person of color, they always will mention the officer's race in conjunction with that. And so now you have people going, oh my God, okay, so here's a person of color, because it's not just black people or brown people, it's anybody who's of color. And this person is taking some kind of an action that might be a little ambiguous, but which you may have enough articulation to go, you know what, I think this constitutes a potential lethal threat, or certainly a potential threat of serious bodily injury, right? But now you start second guessing yourself because I don't really want to shoot this guy, because I don't want to be the next news story that's all over the nation about some white officer that shot somebody. And now it doesn't even matter. Now it doesn't even matter that the race of the officer doesn't even matter. They're going after people just for black officer shoots a black subject. You're seeing the same kind of thing. We've just gone off the deep end with that stuff, and it has very real consequences in exactly the kind of situation you're talking about.
Well, and Chris, I will kind of end what of my situation, or at least regarding my situation. I believe that in my situation, I made the right decision. However, the fact that went through my brain in that short amount of time tells me that there's been a lot of soldiers that have lost their lives because I was put into that decision-making process by our leadership up the chain. Unfortunately, the rules of engagement caused me to go through that process, and the major threat of prosecution, even though I do believe I would have been justified in cooking that round off, that's just a simple fact. And you guys in law enforcement absolutely deal with that. And that kind of segues into my next question, and I'll stop dominating the interview and pass this to Brian. So I've had the opportunity I've had 7 ECQC courses with Craig Douglas. And a majority of the time, there's about 30% is law enforcement. And the overwhelming response to the training is, man, why isn't our department doing this type of training on a regular basis? And basically, we know that the decision-making process that you and I have been talking back and forth on is deeply assisted in that type of training. Being put under that faux or novel life or death stress really helps with that decision-making process. But yet departments are reluctant to embrace that type of training. You and guys like Craig and Paul Sharp in the law enforcement community obviously embrace that, along with the police officers that attend those courses and attend training with guys like you. Why is it that law enforcement agencies do not embrace it?
Well, it's the same thing I think that you see with the whole aspect of getting jiu-jitsu or wrestling or something like that involved. Most officers are not really going to enjoy that kind of training. They're not going to take to that kind of training in the way that I think the self-selecting people that do things like ECQC do. You're probably going to be better off in like SWAT teams or things like that, because the guys are a little bit more oriented towards that kind of thing. And you'll see, certainly with SWAT teams, my experience has been definitely when it comes to the force on force aspect of the shooting stuff, everybody's good to go with. It's when you start getting into the hand-to-hand stuff, some of those people will drop off just because they're not so keen on especially some of the situations that ECQC puts you in. I see ECQC as being more of a stress inoculation type training. Although it's very easily, you could add some other elements on top of that would add more to the decision-making aspect of it. that's the next step, right? That's where we need to go. I mean, I certainly believe that everyone coming out of a police academy should do an ECQC, and I know obviously in Oregon they're certainly moving in that direction with everything that Rich Daniel's doing down there. And I've been to several ECQCs for LE that have been down there. It is a gut check, right? That's the kind of thing. I think that you may actually, if you made that a requirement for police academies, I think that would probably make the decision for some people going through that coursework would probably see that some people would actually probably leave law enforcement before they went out on the road, just having that experience, which would be valuable. Obviously we don't want to lose people, but if people think, hey, I can't do this. If this ever happened to me in real life, there's no way I could face this situation. Then we don't want those people on the road anyway. And now you'd actually be working from a much stronger base with which to build on top of that, as far as decision making, as far as I'm a huge person for composure, right? If ECQC offers anything, is you've been through it, you've experienced it, you know what it's like. It's not the real thing, but it certainly gives you a sort of stress inoculation baseline. To me, that's the platform for which you start to build. Okay, we'll tie it all in. You start to build a warrior mindset, right? The warrior mindset is, I'm not going to overreact to these low-level things, and I'm going to handle these low-level things appropriately. But when I deal with this high-level, immediate threat to life, multiple opponent, guy right on top of me, and we're fighting over my gun or something like that, now I'm not going to hesitate in those situations because I know how bad it can be. And now the confidence that that's going to give people for being out there in the real world is you really can't replicate that in any other way. Not in training, for sure. You take somebody like that and now you give them a number of years of actual of repetitions of actual, being out in the real world and making decisions and having actual physical encounters and maybe even shooting encounters, and they can just build upon that. But I don't know. I think with what you have certainly within law enforcement agencies, within law enforcement academies, you have much more of an administrative mindset as opposed to a mindset that is really about preparing people. Officer survival is not taught in service. Officer survival, a lot of those are buzzwords. Now they're really talking about kind of well-being and things like that. And they'll host yoga classes, but they won't host jiu-jitsu classes generally. A lot of that is because when you come from the administrative perspective, you're worried about bodies on the road. You're worried about potentially losing people to injury. You're worried about, is the training taking too long? And is it again, taking bodies off the road for this 3-day course when really we can give you a 4-hour course and you can get a check the box. And then we can say, see, training did occur. Oh, we trained them. There's zero concern as to the quality of training. It's really just really all we need to do is show that training occurred. There's no incentive to have higher quality training versus lower quality training, anything like that. And so I just don't think you're going to see a hue and cry to really adopt that kind of thing for that very reason. Because it's not about the quality. It's not about what it's doing and how it's helping the officer. It's just, can we show that training occurred? And can we show that training occurred without incurring, overtime, because we've got people that are in a 3-day course, risking injuring somebody who's now not going to be able to go on the road for the next week, and so on and so forth. So it's a very different mentality from the officer and the people that are out there working the road, and administrators, and the sort of the business end of it, if that helps.
Well, Chris, what I'll say is I would hope that we've got some administrators listening to this show and taking to heart some of what you're saying, and hopefully move the needle in the right direction. So, man, those are superb answers, and again, that's why we wanted you on the show to discuss all of this, because this isn't just about improving personal security for the average civilian. We want to increase the security for our society and civil society at large, and this is what folks in law enforcement need to hear, frankly. So thank you so much for all that pointed wisdom. Brian, what you got, brother?
Well, hey, I just want to follow up on that a little too. The ECQC that I attended last year up with Eric and Aaron, by the way, we did have 3 officers from Portland in that training, and it was very cool that Craig gave them the opportunity. He said, when we role played, he said, you can play your officer part, or you can just play a bystander. It's up to you. And one of the guys was a 2-on-1, and one of the things he did, and again, he just reached for his shoulder because he didn't actually have a radio, but he did his call for help, and he works in Metro, and he knows those guys are 3 to 4 minutes out max. So he started staging himself in a situation where he tried to not engage and buy a little time. Now, a guy that works in Morton by himself, and the closest guy is 45 minutes out, that's the guy that I think needs this stuff more than, not that they all need it, but man, those are the guys that they are their only lifeline. What about that?
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. And that's a critical thing. I worked for a city where, literally covered, you're almost always, you really don't go to any call which could have potential, some kind of violent potential, or so even a potential where, hey, I'm have to arrest somebody. You don't go to those calls by yourself. It just, you don't need to. And if you say make a traffic stop and something happens, cover is less than 3 to 5 minutes away. That's not the case for a lot of people. I would totally agree that something like ECQC should absolutely be for those people who are dealing with that kind of stuff. Really what happens, a lot of those guys adjust and adapt, and when they understand they don't have cover coming, they approach the job in a very different way. To be honest with you, I think law enforcement as a whole, especially larger urban areas, can learn a lot from those guys because they don't have ready access to cover. They don't have, you're not rolling to call 6 cops deep. You have to make better decisions about engaging, better decisions about how I'm gonna do this, how I'm gonna contact this person, etc. And we can learn a lot from that, because it's not just about, hey, I'm the police, you're going to do what I tell you to do, et cetera, because you simply don't have the manpower, you don't have the beef behind you to do a lot of that stuff. Some of that is part of the problem that we're dealing with today, is that some people are just way too, they sort of blow right through things. They roll in too deep, too close, too aggressive, when a better way to deal with it would be, hey, I'm going to actually kind of nibble at the edges here. I'm going to approach this in a very different way, or now I need to wait. And instead of being worried about, I got all these calls stacking up and I've got all these people waiting for me to deal with this, it's going to be, hey, no, we're going to take our time on this one. And that's, again, an adjustment I think a lot of us within law enforcement need to make. But certainly somebody who's working by themselves like that is in a position where they probably need an ECQC more than anyone else for absolutely those exact reasons.
No, real good. That's kind of, I figured we'd have the same sentiment on that. So switching gears a little bit, since last time we spoke, what we do accountability at the end of the show, and if you were to give us like a week, and you don't have to like be this week, but like what do you do during like a 1 week period that is like just your base training, workouts, practice, dry fire, live drill? What's your typical training week look like?
I don't really have a typical week, just because a lot of it is just based on what my work schedule is. I mean, I've finally gotten to the point where I'm on a day shift again. And so when I'm during my normal work week, and if I'm not ending up working overtime or ending up starting at 3:00 in the morning because we're doing a SWAT operation early, I'm always trying to work something in at the end of my day. I usually come home. I don't like working out at the station. What I've been doing is doing a lot of sort of short 20 to 30 minute workouts where I'm just doing different things, kettlebells, squats, runs, things like that. I'm trying to do a lot of stuff in a gas mask now. We've had a lot of operations recently that have gone to gas, and some fairly lengthy ones. So I'm trying to work more in the gas mask. Not to mention, it's the time of COVID now. So just being on the safe side. And then in between those, when I'm working, I usually can't get to the dojo very often. And so I'm either doing dry fire. I've been working recently. I've been working on some stuff from Will Petty's vehicle CQB stuff. I've got a real issue when I'm doing that shoulder. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his coursework, but when you're doing a lot of going low and you have to take a low urban prone with rifle, I just have a real hard time on the left side for some reason. So I've been working that with my rifle, and then sometimes I'll even throw my gear on just so I can kind of practice it while I'm wearing my gear, and then obviously dry fire pistol. I do edge weapon stuff. I'll do some just individualized stuff. One of the Japanese martial arts I train has something called EI or EI Jitsu in it, which is a sword drawing. And oddly enough, I use quite a few of the postures. There's a lot of crouching postures and a lot of moving from kneeling to standing. And it actually works. It maps very well to using firearm shooting positions, especially when you're doing things like, for instance, clearing an attic, where you've got to move around in a crouch. So I'm using a lot of that stuff. And to me, that's a way to practice that stuff while having some sort of directed means to do that. Also, I use a live blade when I'm doing that. So it's also helpful for body organization, how you move, how you position yourself, how you move in conjunction with a live weapon, which has obvious crossover to using a firearm as well. When I'm on my days off or when I've got extra time, I get to the dojo when I can. Some weeks that means I'll be there 3-4 days, and I'll do 2 to 3 hours. Other times I get there twice because I've got, I'm doing SWAT stuff on my days off or something like that. So it's a mixed bag. It's all over the place. My whole approach to it is kind of a day by day, where what am I going to do today, and then come up with something that I'm going to do today, just so that I'm continuing to walk forward on that road. I think probably the only other thing, and now that I'm at an advanced age and I'm seasoned, is a lot more work on flexibility. I honestly believe that keeping flexible is one of the things that's allowed me to stay functional, stay doing the things that I'm doing without really having a serious injury. At the age that I'm at now, because I'm in my 50s, and I've actually been telling, we've got a big influx of new guys on the team, and I've been telling a lot of them that are in their 20s, it's like, guys, start working your flexibility now. Because I have people that I work with who are in their 30s and 40s that are completely jacked up and can't do some of the things that I can do, and I don't do anything all that spectacular. But I just don't have the injuries, and I've still got a lot of the flexibility and stuff that you need to do some of those things. I mean, literally sometimes, I'm sure you guys see it, guys just getting up from a kneeling or laying down position on the range. And there are people in their 30s and 40s that can't do that. And you can't be functional if you can't do if you can't get up from the ground, basically. So if there's anything I would say accountability wise is trying to make sure that I'm making myself do flexibility, mobility exercises, because it's so important, and it gets more and more important as you get older.
Nice. No, that's good stuff. There's again, no affiliation here, but ROMWAD is something that a lot of people at my gym do, and it's again kind of seems to gravitate to the slightly older crowd. But that's just ROMWOD.com, and it is a pay service. But you can do it for a month or a few weeks and learn the exercises if you don't know what to do. And man, it's pretty impressive how the difference between doing it and not doing it. And I know you know that. I learn it the hard way when I don't do it for a couple weeks and then go, whoops.
Oh yeah. I'll have to check that out. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of that. I think, one of the things, obviously we're talking about jiu-jitsu. One of the huge advantages to jiu-jitsu, and you see it now everywhere, obviously, because now people can't train since everybody's in lockdown, is just doing a lot of the basic exercises from jiu-jitsu, that basic mobility stuff. I was talking with Eric before about the proprioceptive type stuff, the positional and postural type stuff. You can even do sort of shadow rolling, getting kneeling positions, lay down, come back up to kneeling, things like that. But do those really mindfully, do those where you're paying attention to how you're moving, et cetera. That's all fantastic work that a lot of us completely skip a lot of times because it's boring and you're not rolling with a partner, et cetera. That is really where jiu-jitsu lives. That's the most important part of jiu-jitsu. That's kind of the yoga part, right? Where, really, if jiu-jitsu without opponent a lot of time is yoga, like combat yoga. And that stuff, while it sounds silly, that's the kind of stuff that's going to actually certainly improve your game, but I think also is going to give you a lot more longevity, whether you want to do sport jiu-jitsu or whether you want to do this stuff that we do, which it's being an athlete, being a tactical athlete. Athlete is part of that, and you have to take care of your body for that to continue to do stuff like that.
No, that's cool. I've heard it referred to as involuntary yoga. So, hey, let's move in a direction where is there a topic or a subject currently or something that you want to talk about and spend some time or just hit around with us?
That's a good question. There's so much stuff. I think we've hit a lot of the major points of it. I think one of the things that is going to become an issue, and that we're just starting to see the beginnings of it now, is simply the fact that fewer and fewer people even want to even be police officers. And you can't blame them, because they look at how cops get treated in the media, and I wouldn't want to sign up for that. I certainly wouldn't encourage my kids to do this job. That's going to be a problem when we get further down the road and nobody wants to be a cop, because obviously we need cops. So that's kind of on the horizon. That's going to be an issue. That's going to be a real problem going forward. I don't know. Obviously there's a lot of issues with law enforcement, but overall, like we started at the beginning of the interview, it's overall, I think some of these changes that are sort of being forced on law enforcement are actually good. One of the main things that I feel has been a huge improvement, and that I honestly do think has saved lives, is we just don't go to like suicidal calls and things like that anymore. Certainly early on, the suicidal barricade was a common thing, and you'd go to those fairly frequently. Now we just either walk away from them or we don't even go in the first place. And that makes a lot of sense. I think it saved people, because now you're not bringing the means of their, they want to kill themselves, and you're not bringing the means for them to do that by all they have to do is walk outside and show them show the police their gun. That has been a big improvement in how LE works. I think we're going to need to come up with something that's an interim response that you're starting to see happen now in certain larger agencies, which is, mental health professionals are starting to actually go out to a lot of these calls now that don't require police. And I think that's going to be another game changer and going to be something that's going to be we're going to see in the future, where you're going to see stuff that police just don't go to, but we have other kinds of professionals that go out to them. Again, it's the game is changing now, and in a lot of ways for the better. So
good. Hey, currently, like with our current situation, as you mentioned, this show may be slightly dated by the time it airs, but with being in the state of quote unquote lockdown, kids out of school for a couple weeks already, I've just noticed some cues locally. Do you think that there is some, and I don't mean like start barricading your house or anything, but do you think there is definitely a potential for a rise of kind of like minor B&E stuff and just some of that more miscreant behavior? Because people panhandling aren't going to panhandle as much. They're going to feel a need and a pressure to do something. Do you think that's a valid concern?
Oh, I think so. I mean, just having so many kids out with nothing to do for so long, absolutely, that's going to be something that we're probably going to see. It's obviously in this unprecedented time when we really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, are we? It sounds like they're talking about maybe by the 12th we're going to be back to some semi-normal operations. I still don't think you're going to see school in. I think when the weather starts getting nicer, when people around them are starting to realize that, hey, you know what? I don't have a lot of people around me who are dying or anything like that. They're going to get bored and they're going to find things to do. So that certainly is going to be a factor that certainly is a factor that I would pay attention to. I wouldn't get super panicky about anything just yet. When we have armed bands roving the streets and completely disobeying martial law. Now, oh crap! Now I know why I did ECQC and why I train with my rifle. But I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. But certainly on that minor level of just kids running around with nothing to do, it's kind of like any summer. You start to see that kind of stuff, car prowls, things like that. You start to see that stuff kick up because the kids are out and they got nothing to do.
Yeah. You may have someone who's just maybe not a bad guy, but they're idle and they're gonna potentially do something. So
yeah, I mean, I would argue that if you're idle and you decide that you're going to break into somebody's house, you are a bad guy. I would say that obviously, if this continues, we've really completely blown up our economy. And so, while it's kind of a constant refrain of, basically people that do crime are just poor and not down on their luck and this and that, I disagree with that completely. However, if you take some people who are sort of living a marginal existence and now you make them where they go 2, 3, 6, 8 weeks with no job, some of those people are going to be desperate and are going to have to do stuff. And so that's certainly something that we need to keep in mind. I mean, obviously there's going to be some relief from the government, but again, it's relief from the government, so it's never enough.
Right. Well, hey, I'm going to hand this back over to you, Aaron. What do you got?
Sure. I have one quick question. Do you have any tactics for whenever the toilet paper zombies come out?
Yeah, no, I think it's just kind of the same old, the same tactics you'd apply to anything else.
Same tactics that you would use for zombies?
Yeah, pretty much.
Shoot them in the face.
Okay. Well, then, real quick. So we're going to go into what we're calling the What's Your Favorite Color section of the show. Now, we've had you on before, and we've kind of gone through some of the usual questions, and through that, we learned that you're a pretty big old-school metal fan. So why don't we take it this direction? Since our last show that we had you on, have you been to any concerts you want to talk about?
Yeah. I managed to see Tool just like a week and a half ago. It was the first time I've ever been able to see Tool. I've seen Maynard before with Perfect Circle, but I never saw Tool. So I was super stoked for that. And even better was I saw them on the last show before the Oregon governor canceled all large gatherings. And so we were the very last show. We're actually worried, even driving down to the venue. We're like, oh, I hope they don't cancel it because of this COVID stuff. And we got to see them. And then the very next day they put it out. So I think it was Eugene actually ended up having to cancel that show. But I got to see Tool. So I was super, super stoked for that.
Well, if I can add one question to that, Chris, and I'll let Aaron have it back. How was Danny Carey's drum sound live?
Oh, dude! I mean, they sounded so good. It was absolutely incredible. Yeah, it just, I mean, obviously it's just this wall of sound, and everything just sounded fantastic. It was. Interestingly enough, but probably to be expected, certainly to be expected with Maynard, very, very little crowd interaction. But it was just about the music. It was great. It was absolutely great. Other than the fact that they didn't play Vicarious. They didn't play Vicarious, and I wasn't happy about that. So
doesn't Maynard have his brown belt now? He's at least a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
I know he's a purple. I don't know that he's been promoted or not, but I know that I've been out to Jerome and I've been out to his winery there, or the winery tasting room that they have down in Arizona. And I think it's Verde Valley Jiu-Jitsu that he trains at. He's actually on the website, but it's weird because there's some pictures of him, but they don't really mention him. But there's no indication of his rank or anything. There was a recent YouTube kind of series of little YouTube interviews and stuff with him, and he was actually teaching jiu-jitsu in one of them, but I think he still had a purple in that, but I don't know how long ago that was made. And
Eric showed me some video of him. He's pretty serious about shooting too, or at least into it, right?
Yeah, I think he's recently gotten into that. Yeah, he's an interesting dude, I'll tell you what.
Oh yeah. Now, okay, so in addition to Tool, did you go to any others?
I got to see Maiden. I don't even remember, that was a couple months ago, I guess it was, which was awesome, totally awesome. And then prior to that, saw Priest with Halford. So that was great too.
Ooh.
All my old favorites.
And that's Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden.
Die with your boots on.
The people that might not understand who that is, yeah.
Well, hey, Eric, I can't remember, wasn't the first concert we ever went to, wasn't that Testament, Megadeth, and Iron Maiden?
I think that was
Judas Priest. I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up. It was Judas Priest. Sorry.
Yeah, Aaron, I think that was the first concert that you and I went to. That's right.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Sorry, I mixed up the band names here.
Now, Chris, is Eddie still part of the show?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, some things die hard, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, man, what else have you been up to, again, besides shooting, training, doing your SWAT stuff, and going to some killer rock concerts?
Not much. No, other than that, it's just kind of spending time with the family, I spend a lot of time with my daughter. So going to some volleyball tournaments and stuff, some of which are very long. Getting up at 4 a.m. so we can drive down 2 hours to go to a venue that starts at 7. Yeah, that's kind of brutal. But it's fun. It's fun to see young people blossoming into sports and leadership and things like that. It's great to watch that. So that's kind of the main thing I've been doing other than that. And then some occasional side trips here and there. Nothing to no very long distances or no super destination places or anything. We were planning on doing some later this year, but who knows now what's going to happen there.
at least you do live in one of my favorite places in the country. So I love when I get to come up there and see Eric and Brian, because there's a handful of people that I love to get to see up there, but it really is my favorite place.
Oh yeah, I love it up here. I grew up in Connecticut, so completely different. And I've been out here for really most of my life now, actually. It's fantastic up here.
Man, Chris, what an awesome interview. I think we're closing in on the end of the show. We really, really appreciate you coming back and supporting us. Again, you were on our 4th episode. I'm not sure where this is going to align in the shows, but we're going to be over 20 with you now. So this has been an awesome experience with you again. I hope to continue this, because we have certain guests that we want to make sure keep returning, because it blesses us and helps educate us and our audience. And we hope that you are a continued guest. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I mean, I always enjoy talking to you guys. So thank you.
I think we'll go ahead and say good evening. You enjoy the rest of yours, and we'll talk again soon.
You as well. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, guys. It is that time for accountability, and I'll go ahead and kick it off. So for exercise and activities this week, I have been keeping up with multiple walks, usually a couple of walks a day with my wife and family. Been nice. Even my young boys just, itching to get out of the house. They like to get around the neighborhood, so we've been doing that quite a bit. Now, and of course also playing a lot of basketball with my teenage son. Again, that's a lot of fun. Now, working from home, what I've been doing is in the middle of the day, I'll set an alarm to remind myself to run upstairs and do some quick exercise. What I've been doing is I've been keeping a log of this and trying to increase these every single day. I'll start out and I'll do as many bodyweight squats as I can, and then I'll log that, and then I'll move on to the next thing, which is as many pull-ups as I can do. Now, just full disclosure, and nobody make fun of me, especially you, Brian, Mr. CrossFit. I have one of those total gyms. My wife got it several years ago, and to be honest, I like it quite a bit because you can do a lot of exercise on there at low impact. Now, so I have it set up for pull-ups on the highest setting, so I'm getting, of course, the least amount of help on that. But because of that, I'm able to do quite a few reps, in the 20 to 25 range. And again, I'm trying to increase that every day, and I've been successful at that. Now on to dry fire. I have been dry firing a couple of times a day. Being under lockdown here, I'm making sure I'm doing that. What I've really been working on is keying into my trigger pull. Now, my coach definitely explains that with that grip, heavy grip, your trigger control is not as important, but it still is important. He didn't say it wasn't important, but it's just lower on the list. But I've been keying in on my trigger control to try and get consistent pull and try and get a particular feel for the trigger that I can get consistency across from using both hands for grip, support hand only, and of course strong hand only. I've been doing a lot of that, and especially my support hand only, I'm getting some really good trigger pulls without disturbing the sights. That's going to help me a lot when I get back into IDPA when they start running those again. Okay, so for my range time, I actually skipped the drill of the week this week because I had an opportunity to meet some friends at the range that I've been trying to get to the range for at least 6 months. They finally came to meet me, and we had a really nice time. So since they were not as serious as shooters, I kept it laid back, and we had a lot of fun. So again, it was mainly out there to just get some guys out there to shoot that don't normally shoot. Now, that's it for me, guys. Now, Brian, Again, Mr. CrossFit, let's hear what you have.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Brian here. Had a really good week, actually. I've been very motivated and doing a lot of cardio and strength conditioning this week. I got several CrossFit workouts in, including logging into Zoom and doing a workout with my fellow teammates there at the gym who I can't see in person, but at least I can see online, and did some additional strength training. There were some other challenges my gym throughout this week, and one of them was to either run or walk with a burden, and I did a 1 mile walk with a 50-pound ruck, which is not like crazy or amazing, but it was above and beyond my normal workout stuff. And I did actually get a couple dry fire sessions in this week. Shot the drill, and I did pretty well on it. It's I can't really score it like I would live fire because I am shooting it indoor, using the SIRT pistol and one of the training markers, but at least I'm able to get my draw times and everything, and I was able to do all of the 3 second or less drill in 3 seconds or less, so that was very cool. Can't tell exactly what my hit accuracy was, but my targets do actually record the hits, so I know the times are there, and I'm kind of simulating distance and size of target, but pretty much what the actual target would have been had I done it outdoors. But again, not the same as live fire. But anyway, feel like I'm really still getting after it that way and trying to keep up on my vitamins and that vitamin D, which is important if you're spending a lot of time indoors. Highly recommend that. But anyway, that's about all I'm going to share for the week, and I think I'll hand it over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian and Aaron, for your accountability. Man, I say this and I beat a dead horse, I guess. I love hearing your guys' accountability each week. So moving on to mine, I had one jiu-jitsu workout, and full disclosure, this is kind of a funny story. My partner and I, of course, we know each other extremely well. We believe we're being responsible. We haven't been remotely close to anybody that could have been exposed as well. So tertiary, so on and so forth. And so we made the adult decision to, still try to train in jiu-jitsu, but stay secluded from everybody. Well, lo and behold, we got chewed out by a 2-star general for not social distancing. But yet I will add, which, I'm not going to point fingers, but there was a gaggle of other folks, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 meters from us, but we were the target. But, oh well, we went ahead and moved our training to our own area, and we did one workout for like ECQC, weapons-based grappling, did some gun grappling and whatnot. So that was, I guess, a blessing was that it kind of forced us to focus on some of that. So I've been taking some additional Hillsdale online classes. One of them is the Great Books 102, and had some Shakespeare Tempest this week. And also I just started a new class called The Great American Story, A Land of Hope. I also got that book, incredible history book, real fun narrative-based textbook. So I recommend that book highly. I dry fired twice. My focus has been more on my jiu-jitsu research and videos. So regarding the videos, so I've primarily been studying the Danaher leg locks, and a new set of videos I downloaded that I recommend super highly is Lachlan Giles escape videos. Support these folks, support Professor Giles as he supports us, and stay tuned for a later date regarding Professor Giles. So moving on to the drill of the week, we've been doing the KR training 3 seconds or less drill. I think we just prescribed it on the last show. with no time. This week, we are going to do that drill with the 3-second par time on each string. Now, if you folks listened to the last episode, that's a long description of that drill. So please go on to KR Training site to get that. I'll have the link in the show notes so you can easily go on there and both get the description, print that off, and also print their KR Training target for that as well. And please email us at crew@evosec.org. That's crew@evosec.org. And let us know what you think of that drill. I think that folks are really going to get a lot out of this drill, and we're going to make this a staple in EvoSec. So get out there and shoot it and let us know. With that said, I think we're going to go ahead and close out the show this evening. We really appreciate you tuning in, and please share our podcast with loved ones and friends. It helps get the word out for us and enables people as self-protectors. So until next time, stay safe out there.